If you are eligible to vote in 2026 and you are not planning to vote, I need to speak directly to you today. And the primary question is, why the F are you not planning to vote? The stakes are so high. And before anybody says, oh, David, voting in 2026 is not going to remove Donald Trump from office, I know that. I understand how presidential terms work. I've made it clear that unless Donald Trump dies, he is going to be president until January of 2029. He's not going to disappear the morning after the midterms, but that is just not the argument. Think of the 2026 election as the process of hiring the departure committee for Donald Trump. You are choosing the people who are going to oversee the final 2 years of Donald Trump's presidency. You are deciding who controls the committees, who has investigative power to look into the corruption, who has subpoena power, who can block terrible legislation, who can place limits on an administration that is demonstrating its contempt for limits on its power time and time again. And so what we have to understand is that if control of Congress changes, or even just the House of Representatives, Trump is neutered politically. His agenda is dead, and his officials can be forced to testify. His administration can be buried in investigations into misconduct and corruption and conflicts of interest and abuses of power. Will that remove Trump immediately? No, it's not going to remove Donald Trump immediately, but it can mire Trump in oversight for 2 years and expose what his administration has been doing. It'll weaken MAGA. It'll make it way more difficult for Donald Trump to spend the remainder of his presidency operating without any meaningful resistance. And then it sets up 2028. And this is, if you're in the camp of, I don't care about midterms, I care about who's the next president, then you should still be voting in 2026, because what happens in November is going to set up circumstances for 2028. The people elected in 26 are going to be in office during the next presidential election. They may be responsible for protecting that election. They may be responsible for responding to another attempt from Republicans to undermine results. And so we need to vote now to ensure that the next transfer of power happens. Now, let me deal with another common excuse. My vote doesn't matter. When did an election come down to just one vote? Your vote feels insignificant because elections involve millions of people. But consider what happens if everybody who thinks exactly as you do stays home. I've explained this to people so many times. When one person goes, what are the odds my vote changes the result? Well, the odds that your vote changes the result are low. But there are millions of people out there who say the same thing to themselves. They go, what are the odds my vote changes the result? If that group of people, if everyone who wonders about the power of their one vote stays home, collectively, that is more than enough votes to flip every single election result. The group that is worried about the power of a single vote together can flip an election. If 10,000 people in a competitive district each decide, oh, my vote is meaningless, that is no longer a meaningless vote as a group. That is 10,000 missing votes. Elections are decided by those accumulated decisions. Nobody believes a single raindrop causes a flood, but the flood is made up of individual raindrops. Maybe you believe the Democratic Party has failed to meet the moment, and that's really why you're thinking about staying home. Or maybe you think the candidates are too cautious or too corporate or too old or too weak or too radical or terrible at communicating. Some of those criticisms are completely legitimate in individual cases. You have to look at each election, of course, but these are not, Trump and his love letters to Kim Jong-un. These are not love letters. These are hiring decisions at the end of the day. And so you are choosing who gets power, and refusing to choose won't leave the position empty. It's going to let someone else fill it. And Donald Trump supporters understand this because they routinely vote for candidates that they previously said they're a liar, they're a fraud, they're an idiot. Because a lot of these Trump supporters realize, well, I'd rather put in our fraud than let these Democrats get any power. And they know that the political power rests with the result of these elections. Now, meanwhile, there are some people on the left treating voting like a restaurant review. If the candidate didn't provide a perfect experience, I'm going to leave 1 star and never come back. I think that that's a very dangerous way to think about power. The 2026 election is not going to instantly solve the problem of MAGA, but it is going to determine whether Trump spends his final 2 years with these compliant accomplices in the House and Senate or some actual oversight. And it's going to determine whether they enter 2028 strengthened, where Trump has the ability to pick his replacement and that replacement has a good shot at becoming the next president, or whether MAGA is going to enter 2028 wounded, with Trump increasingly unable to pick his successor and whoever the nominee is increasingly unlikely to win. So you don't need to be inspired. We just need to think about the circumstances and the assignment. We are hiring Donald Trump's departure committee. And so we simply need to show up and vote. Now, in different parts of the country, the stakes are different. You may be voting in elections. This could be House, Senate, gubernatorial. It just applies to whatever is relevant to your specific situation. You might be choosing between an incumbent Democrat and a challenger Republican, or you might be choosing between a Republican and a Democrat in a race where the incumbent is retiring, and the incumbent might be a Republican or it might be a Democrat. It might be a Democrat who's up for re-election. All of these different scenarios are there. It is always useful and important and empowering to make your vote one of the votes that decides who your representatives are going to be. And so I hope that there are not really people in my audience who are thinking about staying home and not voting. If you are thinking about not voting or stay home, please leave a comment on this video. Send me an email, info@davidpakman.com, and tell me, I am not going to vote because, and I want to hear from you. We'll feature, if there are such people in my audience, I really hope there aren't many, but if there are such people in the audience, we'll feature some of the reasons you're thinking about not voting in an upcoming Friday feedback. But let's hope that that number is few and far between. Thanks for watching. Check out this other video. And if you like our content, make sure to subscribe so YouTube puts our videos in your feed, and subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and Apple.